Hello and welcome to Curious Futurist, the show that explores how today's technological and economic trends are shaping tomorrow's world. I'm your host, the Curious Futurist. This week's guest is Neeti Virmani, a business strategist, an investor in early-stage startups, and the president of the South Korea-India Business Council. As you'll see from the interview, Neeti's had an extensive career covering telecoms, covering media, covering fast-moving consumer goods, and all that was in India before she moved with her husband to South Korea a few years ago, where now she not only invests in and advises early-stage startups, she also is a business coach, and she helps promote women in business. So in this week's interview, I hope you'll join us as we discuss what Neeti has learned from her extensive career in business, the similarities she sees between the challenges that face large businesses on the one hand and small early-stage startups on the other. You'll see what the three key traits are that Neeti looks at when it comes to gauging the likely success of early-stage startups. We'll see which emerging technologies Neeti sees as being likely to have the biggest, most transformative impact on the business world in the next few years, and how these technologies are already starting to have an impact today as we talk. On top of all that, we're also going to get Neeti's insight into how you can grow your business and your career in these very challenging times. Are you ready to meet her? Welcome, Neeti. Thank you for joining us on the channel. You've had a remarkable career across several major business sectors like telecoms and media, and then consumer goods was FMCG, so like consumer goods. Can you tell us what some of the major milestones in your career have been?
Interesting question. So my entire career has been made of several milestones, both small and big. Of course, I'll talk about the major milestones here, but honestly, I strongly feel it's the small milestones which add up to the big ones. So the four biggest milestones which happened in my career, one, actually the answer lies in your question itself. So one was the telecom industry. Getting into the telecom industry was a big milestone because it changed my entire, way of working, entire perspective. It changed, it brought in a lot of learnings, telecom being a very fast paced and, industry, and it changes literally every month or every year. So a lot of changes happened both personally and professionally in a good way. And I spent 8 years, out of my entire career in telecom industry. And the second milestone which came in was when I started working with the FMCG sector, where I got a very good, deep understanding into the marketing profile alone and the consumer goods. So till then, I had been, majorly into the business development function. And later, the third milestone which came in was when I started working with one of the leading radio stations in the country, which is a part of the Reliance Group, in Bombay as the station director. And that was a P&L function. So it not only gave me an insight into the revenues, which, was my core strength, but it also helped me gain understanding of programming and content generation. So I think from all the three industries, I learned a lot of different things. All of them added a lot of value to my career. And all these things, finally added up to a lot of things which happened later. So a lot of milestones which happened later. So one of the milestones, the fourth milestone, I would say, which happened was moving to South Korea. So while the movement happened because my husband got the opportunity to work here, but when I came here, I started immediately working with a non-profit board, something which I had never done in before. So that was a new experience. And it was close to my heart. In fact, in my entire, corporate career, I had always wanted to be doing something for the underprivileged and somehow couldn't devote too much time the way I should have or the way I would have wanted to. So it gave me an opportunity to do that. And because I was on the board, I got a lot of experience, on handling board, managing board, especially governance. So yes, that's where it started. And soon, within 2 years, I started getting opportunities to work in startup ecosystem, which came very naturally to me because of my hardcore business experience. Almost the entire of my career, I had been building businesses, transforming businesses. So it came naturally.
Oh, that's interesting. Sorry to interrupt, but that's an interesting idea. Is that working for, I guess we'd say, fairly large businesses or fairly large organizations, and being able to apply those lessons to startups as well. It's how easy is it then to make that switch? I mean, it's from what you're saying, it's many of the same kind of skills that are beneficial for both, right?
When I was in my corporate career, while yes, I was a part of the large businesses or large organizations, but within those organizations, there are verticals, there are small businesses. There are businesses which the organizations want to start fresh. There are businesses which are not doing well, and they need to be transformed. So, so to be honest, luckily I got the opportunity to work in such teams where I could start things from the scratch as well. And so whether it was the Reliance group or whether it was in Telecom or even in FMCG, all the sectors, I did get opportunity to really start from fresh, to pick up the threads and then, build a business which was flourishing. And I left and I was so proud to leave it at a very flourishing note. So I think I would say it's like being an entrepreneur in corporate sector. And therefore, the learnings came very easy to me when I joined the startup ecosystem. Now, what happens is typically, in the startup ecosystem, sometimes the teams are very good on the technical side. They have a lot of knowledge on the technical side. And the management skills, the softer skills is where a lot of times they need help apart from functions, apart from functional skills. So that's an area where which comes very easy through so much of experience in the corporate sector. So it really added up. It also gave me an opportunity to be in a position where I could help others. So while, the entire life I was building my career, it helped me to build others.
I'm fascinated by this actually, because what strikes me in what you've said, I mean, there's lots of interesting stuff there, but one thing that really struck me is talking about the move to South Korea, and that you started off then basically on a non-profit board. So what was that? How did you get involved in it? And it sounds like it was a really beneficial experience for you. So let's go. So what was that? And then how did you get involved?
So when I came here, it all started with a pursuit to network with people because we were absolutely new in the country. And I came across this organization called Seoul International Women's Association. And I still remember meeting, the president, and had a brief chat with her. And then she interviewed me and we just got going. So I think somewhere the note we had in common was the need to do philanthropy. And and at that time I remember, I went into my childhood days, in school when I used to collect money for leprosy related initiatives, because at that time in India, leprosy was pretty much prevalent. So I still remember that, and I used to do it with a lot of passion. Later, I used to donate, money by buying a small journal which used to come at that time called Reader's Digest. And because I knew that whenever I buy it, a fraction of that amount goes to raising girl children, so girl child. So I think it was always there in the unconscious mind, and it came very naturally when I met her, and she offered me to really lead the philanthropy initiatives, to handle the fundraising initiatives. So I started there, and we rolled out very interesting projects in philanthropy, in the education sector. And it really benefited a good section of society. Yeah.
Well, do you have an example then of an educational project, the sort of thing that you would do?
So we did a project for the multicultural student education in Korea. The students who come from different backgrounds, essentially not the Koreans, but it could be multinational backgrounds. And obviously, the percentage, if we compare in the population, is very, very less. So they need help. And, they firstly need help to really get absorbed into the culture, into the society. And that's where we came in. And there are a few education institutions which are related to that, which are doing a lot of good work in that field. And we got associated with two of them and did a lot of good work around it. So we brought about a lot of impact in that sector with those two institutions. And, even today they are doing a great job. They're growing, they're providing that kind of ecosystem to the students, providing that kind of education, providing that kind of care and attention, which they actually deserve.
But right now you seem to be doing a lot of work to support kind of female leadership in business.
Yes.
It's a philanthropic thing. So why that specifically? I mean, what kinds of challenges do you think women face when it comes to developing their careers?
So I think working with women and developing their careers has been there since day one of my career, whether it was working with colleagues or working with peers or working with team members, female team members. Developing them has always been a natural process or natural phenomenon. I think overall, I feel that, the gender gap or I would say the work-life balance is one of the things which women face as challenge. And so let's say, for example, one of the females and a male member, they both graduate from the same B school. So when they join an organization, both are passionate, both are smart, top of the class, and they start working. Now, let's say in 3-4 years, they grow not just professionally, but personally as well. So there is marriage that happens and the family that happens. So if you look at the percentage of females dropping out or women dropping out or dropping their careers to really strike a work-life balance, is much higher than the corresponding male number. So that's one area where, we try to sort of address the support issues that the women might have, provide them an ecosystem where they can harness their true potential and are not really forced to make that choice of dropping their careers. So that's where it came from. And I think one of the ways I feel is that to really provide that ecosystem to them to come out and, show their true talent, whether it's in terms of starting their own business or even as leaders in corporate world, how they can flourish their careers. So that's where, the whole thought process comes in.
What would you say, with your experience, what would you say is the most important advice you might give to any woman who's watching this, for example? They're just entering the business world, or they have maybe been working for a few years, they want to take their career to the next level. What kind of advice would you give them?
So to take their career to the next level, I think the foremost thing is to have that perseverance and to stay passionate, to not lose focus into a lot of other things which would come in life, whether it's to do with promotions at work, whether it's to do with getting preference or not getting preference on salary hikes, normal personal life. So wherever they find, there are issues that they are facing versus their male colleagues, I think they should just stay on course. They need to stay on course and just handle the situation with their utmost grace is what I would recommend today's female colleagues.
So with the utmost grace, what do you mean by that?
So when I say grace, women have so there's a natural, difference between male and female, and, females have inherent strengths. They've got the patience, they've got the emotional strength. They are good when it comes to creating efficiencies. They are good in terms of ethics, in terms of percentage. So these are some of the qualities which are already built and which are already there. So when I'm talking about utmost grace is using those strengths to their advantage.
So let's go back to what we were talking about before then, when looking at working in different parts of businesses and how that might apply to startups and so on. I mean, right now, people in all kinds of sectors in all countries, kind of all around the world right now, they're talking about the importance of things like innovation or reinvention, maybe in terms of technology and business models and mindsets. I mean, what's been your experience like of fostering an innovation culture in your career?
Innovation culture has been there from day one. Like I told you, having worked in telecom sector or even FMCG or even media, especially telecom is a very high or highly fast-paced sector, especially at that time back in the early 2000s, the sector was booming. It was growing every day. There was a different product, different bill plan. There were new players launching. At one point of time, I had stopped counting the number of players in every city. So there would be about 13, 14, 15 players. So innovation was the only way to survive. So whether it was in the market, whether it was with the product, whether it was with the customers, whether it was with the service that was being provided, at every step there was an innovation that had to be fostered. So I think foremost thing when we talk about innovation and how one can really foster that culture is to have an open mind. It's important to allow the team to make mistakes. Of course, I mean, those mistakes should not be something which are out of control totally. But when I say allowed of mistakes, I'm talking about literally the ideas, the brainstorming sessions, and how we can quickly, with agility, apply them in the market and then take a quick action and move to the next step. So that's very important. And, to operate with an open mind is very important when we talk about fostering innovation.
Okay, so mindset's a big deal. This seems to link into what you were saying about startups and some of the challenges they're facing in terms of management and maybe softer skills rather than technical skills. Do you think they need sometimes support with mindset as well?
It depends on the team. It depends really on the team which is handling. So let's say, for example, in today's situation, the COVID situation, there's a clear difference that one can see between the startups who are able to turn around with speed, with innovation, with a high adaptability, they are doing far better. So there's an agility required. So that's where, the attitude towards developing the products, new products, and not just, yes, sometimes we are very passionate about our own idea, about our own product, but then when the environment has changed, one needs to change because those same products won't give you the revenues that you're looking at. So that's where I think the mindset comes in, and that's exactly what I'm referring to.
I mean, one thing you do talk about, I've seen that intrigues me, is when you say that you help startups to shape their ideas. So what does that mean in the context of kind of what you do, and how do you go about doing that?
There are startups that I have mentored, till now at various stages. So they could be, at the incubation stage. They could be at a stage where they have developed the idea and, created certain impact with that idea to a certain extent. So when I talk about shaping ideas, I'm talking about shaping ideas according to the requirement. When we talk about, for example, an idea in, let's say, e-commerce sector, now it might, the idea might sound very niche, very different, very new, very fresh, but then is it executable? Is it practical? Is it scalable? Is it something that will create a competitive edge in the current form? Is it something that will add up to the revenues? So when I say shaping ideas, I'm talking about shaping them from these perspectives to give them a much more better outlook when from a business perspective. So,
okay, so is this like, so this is kind of like things like finding product market fit or maybe having to pivot if something's not working? I mean, are we talking about things like this, finding out the real commercial potential of an idea?
One is commercial potential, and the other is that to really ensure that, practically it is executable. And yes, I mean, only if it is executable, it can lead to a commercial potential. So that's one of the important things when I talk about shaping ideas.
Okay. So we've mentioned then, or you've mentioned that you're a startup mentor, but you're an early stage investor as well, right? In some startups, is that correct?
That's right.
So the interesting thing for me then is, what do you look for in a startup that makes you think it's going to have a really good chance of succeeding, where you think, yes, I'm going to invest in that, or yes, I'm going to help them? What is it that you think makes a startup kind of stand out in that way when you're looking?
The foremost thing is the core mission or vision, I would say, the core vision and the values. And that's definitely linked to the idea. So the idea and the vision. And the third important thing is the team, the talent, the team.
Okay. Sorry. Yes.
So these are the first three important things that I would see. And when I'm talking about idea, I'm not just talking about idea alone. I'm talking about what kind of competitive positioning does it have currently? How are they planning the entry strategy into the market? How are they going to differentiate themselves? So how are they going to create that niche? So when I'm talking about niche, I'm not talking about really having a very niche idea, but to creating that space in the market, because literally virtually every industry nowadays is cluttered. So to really figure out, how the competitive advantage is going to get created is very important. And then, of course, coming to financials. So what kind of, watertight case do they have? What's the outlook in the next 3 years? 1 year, 2 year, and 3 years, or maybe in some cases 5 years. So depending on the industry. And so where the revenue is going to come up from. So the entire revenue model. So these are the broadly the buckets that I look at when I decide to associate with any startup.
Okay, so we talked about vision, of course, as well as team and some of the financials. Are there any other things that you look for as well in terms of vision? For example, lots of people are concerned about the environment right now. People are concerned about inclusiveness and things like this. Do you kind of include any maybe social concerns in the things that you look for in a startup?
Yes, preferably yes, because that's where the social impact comes in. And so whether it's to do with sustainability or with education, learning and education, or diversity. So some of the things that I definitely look at, because one is working with a pure profit in mind, and the other is working with profit in mind, but at the same time creating a social impact. Now, social impact could be in many ways. One is, of course, like I said, the sustainability development goals, whether it's to do with environment or with, let's say, smart urban settlement or, creating smart cities. The other is also the side of the business and commerce. So let's say, the idea of Uber, Uber, when it started, it created such a huge amount of social impact. It brought in so much convenience to people's daily lives. It was so economical. So that's in my mind, that's another way to look at creating impact in terms of social impact.
Sorry, just to look at that as an example, though, this kind of rise of the gig economy and I guess more flexible working. The interesting thing is about something like Uber or a lot of kind of delivery companies is that they have expanded that opportunity for people to work on a more flexible basis or bring flexible working to more people. But I know also, I mean, for example, here in London, there's been a lot of pushback against Uber.
Yes, I'm aware about that.
Yeah, I mean, on the basis that it kind of undermines existing employment contracts. It's less secure work. It's less reliable, and then also maybe there were. I have to word this carefully, but there were questions around consumer safety compared to other comparable services. So I just guess when we're looking at stuff like this, there's always going to be some sort of trade-off, I think, right? When we look at disruption or change in this way. So it's opportunity for many, but perhaps taking away opportunity for others, depending on which industry we talk about. Although I'm just kind of speculating here. I guess the question that occurs to me is, because you're working or have worked now with quite a lot of startups, different technologies, different ideas, and Uber's a good example of disruption in a marketplace. I mean, what kinds of technologies do you think, from the things you're looking at now or have done recently, what kind of technologies do you think have the greatest potential to transform people's lives day to day in the next few years?
I think foremost technology, which we are already experiencing, and now especially with the COVID situation, is the AI, the artificial intelligence in every form, the machine learning and the algorithms. Yeah, and that's all, supported by the data. So it's all data. The big data, which, started many years back, is now completely, governed by AI. And AI has really helped, especially in the COVID situation, where, e-commerce was the way to go for most of the startups, for most of the companies. Big or small, actually, and so AI, and there was no time to really plan. I think COVID was the best situation for best test of any product. There was no time to plan. There was no time to go and ask the consumer, hey, listen, this is the situation. What do you want now from us? No, there's no time. So, AI really helps to understand, to pull out that data, to quickly, use that data, whatever data was coming every day. The e-commerce companies, let's say, if the individual is ordering 10 categories on one day, on the second day, the e-commerce company or the startup has to ensure that those 10 orders, the 10 categories are available on the website. So, we've all seen that, right? The categories changed, everything changed.
Yeah,
So,
sure. I mean, I
yeah,
guess
so
it's ironic, I suppose. I mean, COVID's not a happy situation at all. It's been very challenging, very bad for a lot of people. But at the same time, I guess it has this external pressure has had a huge impact on the way business has evolved so quickly. And I guess how it's now proven that all this technology that people were sort of toying with before, it's like, well, actually, yes, we can deploy it. Yes, it does work. Yes, we can do more things than perhaps we were ready for. So it's interesting how you have this external pressure, which then kind of pushes development forward. So I'm just wondering what you think, if the company's learning from this. I mean, what do you think we might see next? Like next year or in 3 years or whatever. How you think AI might, for example, might take some great leaps forward from this experience?
I think, like you rightly said, AI has been there for last few years now, and in fact, it's been there for many years, but it was being used more at a theoretical level rather than practical. So now, why I'm talking about COVID while AI has been there, COVID situation has really pumped up, investments behind AI even more because of very obvious reasons, And going forward, so things like robots being used for even common things is gonna become very common now. Essentially because it's not something which is, it's just gonna go overnight. It's here to stay, unfortunately. And we have to learn to sort of live with it. And technologies like robots, technologies like, let's say, wearable internet, all these technologies are going to really help us sail through that period. And there will be, while these technologies are being used to cope with the situation, the consumer behavior will change, and it's already changing. The fact that consumer was seeing a lot of comfort in ordering online rather than going to retail has just increased. So parallelly, the consumer behavior is changing. So even if we try to come back to the early normal, we will not be able to come back fully. There will be some, hybrid which will be working. So I think more and more of these technologies are going to come up. So whether it's AI, like I said, whether it's within that, the robots, the wearable internet, blockchain, all these technologies are going to find space, more and more into the consumers' lives.
Well, yes, that makes sense. I was thinking, if we're talking about kind of consumer habits changing, we're talking about the fact that it's unlikely things are going to return to how they were before lockdown and so on. For business, let's take retail as an example then, because obviously Amazon, other online retailers have grown spectacularly. What do you think this means, though? I guess if you have a business that's on a high street or in a physical store, and things are now looking really bad for let's say small business owners, for people who work in these kinds of businesses. I mean, how do you think people should respond to the fact that this change is probably here to stay and this is a bit of a threat to them? I mean, if you were in this situation, what would you do to try and kind of try and ride this wave of technology, I guess, rather than be overwhelmed by it?
A lot of companies are pivoting. We are seeing that. And, to give you an example, I really liked one of the e-commerce companies back in India. Now it's a company which basically connects, suppliers. So it's a B2B. It's in the B2B space, and I really like the way they actually shifted everything on a work from home mode. It's very interesting because all their data is lying on the cloud. So even, their call center is working through that. And that's the technology which, again, will be going forward used a lot.
So, sorry, does this mean that they had like a call center that was an actual physical call center, but now they can have their call center people all working from home and sort of connecting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's something which, and I know a few others also which have done similar thing. But what I'm trying to say is that there are already companies which are startups which are pivoting, and they're innovating. They're innovating constantly. They're using different technologies to ensure that they have their operations don't stop. Now, unless it's something like hardcore retail, yes, retail is something which has affected them. It's the worst affected, unfortunately, and whether it's to do with restaurants, whether it's to do with malls, whether it's to do with cinema, multiplexes. So, like there are multiplexes which haven't earned revenue in the last 6 months, Now they are also planning to launch products. Some of them are looking at, working out packages where they can hire, where they can rent out their hall to, let's say, a family who wants to, get their 20, 30 guests, and, it becomes like a private cinema hall. So, because there's also a capping on the number of people that can get together. So companies are trying their level best. They're brainstorming at, various levels to ensure that they come up with ideas. They use technologies to ensure that they can get the product to the consumer in the least time. And while they don't want to spend too much time in planning, they have to pivot. And for that, whatever brainstorming they have to do, they have to do.
Okay, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think adaptability, flexibility, like if something is not working, having a mindset to change quickly, agility, these are 3-4 things which, I would have worked with if I was there in that situation. And that's what I would recommend to startups.
Let's try it. So let's try it from another perspective as well then. So that's the business side, as it were. If, let's say if you were starting your career now, so you've just come out of school or university, let's say you were starting your career now, but you knew what you know now with your experience, where do you think you would start? If you were looking to start a career, would you do anything differently? I mean, in what ways would you react to, do you think, to the way things are changing?
Are you saying that I would have, I'm literally fresh out of college and I don't have a job right now?
Yeah. Let's try that. Except that you have all the knowledge. This is an impossible situation, obviously, but like, I guess I'm pitching this as kind of advice for young people kind of going into the jobs market or into the economy now. But you have all this experience. So if you were in their position, just coming out of college, but you have this experience and knowledge and a great network, what would you suggest they do? Like, what would you do if you were in their situation?
It depends on, the person's background. If I was there, because right now, financially, it's tough for companies to really even, give salaries. So there are a lot of employees who are not taking salaries. There are a lot of companies which are ensuring that they don't have to sack the employees. So they may not give salaries, but they are not sacking employees. So which is a good thing. So I think the foremost thing in that scenario, if let's say financially the things are not so bad, I would have focused on creating impact, looking at ideas where I can do something to help
So like
help people
take a
at large.
Okay.
So help people at large. So that I'm talking about from a 30,000 feet level. So it could be anything. It could be, let's say, there's a startup which is struggling, and I could, help them with an idea or with whatever inputs they need, or whatever work has to be done, or if there's a new solution which has to be come up with, which has to be developed. If I have a technical background, I can do that. So I think what is important, if I was there, I would have tried to create that impact in whichever small way I could do to any of the business. It could be non-profit also. It could be non-profit. It could be profit, because right now, the situation is such that everything is disturbed in all directions, whether it's humanitarian grounds or whether it's business front. All fronts are disturbed right now. So in whatever way one can create the impact in a positive way, I think that is what is important right now.
Okay, so also you think maybe for people to take a step back, think perhaps a bit more out of the box. I hate that phrase, out of the box, but more imaginatively about how they might have an impact in the areas they're interested in.
Yes.
So if someone, oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry.
Well, I was just thinking. So this you were saying before this. So this is basically if the financial situation of this freshly graduated person is not bad, this gives them a bit of space, a bit of time to do this. If someone has to sort of try and get work somehow, do something, you think it would still really be beneficial for them to try in their spare time to do the same thing? So you have to work, you have to get a job if you can find work. But this would still be important, right? For perhaps to do on the side.
Absolutely. I mean, what I would say is so there are two things to, everybody's lives. One is, you want all the, I'm sure you would have heard of the Maslow's hierarchy, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, there's a certain point in one's career where you've met sort of all your needs, and you want to just create or impact, or I would say help people to have a better life or to be in a better situation. So whether one does it along with their core job which they're doing, which satisfies those few lower levels of Maslow hierarchy, or whether in the current situation where the whole Maslow hierarchy is affected, just creating that small impact in somebody's life, just doing that much is going to add a lot of value to the person's career in the long run.
Well,
so,
yeah.
I strongly believe that as long as you're creating, you're impacting somebody in a positive way, it will add up to your life. The dots will join, like Steve Jobs popularly says. That you look back and you'll see the dots joining.
Oh, yes. That's probably very important advice right now. Actually, yeah, it makes even more sense now than ever, perhaps. I suppose just coming back then, so you've had this amazing experience really in your career, and you've been in India, you worked in India, and now you've been working in South Korea. What were the differences that you found in kind of, I mean, cultural differences, I guess, would be here all day, but like, what would you say are some of the interesting kind of business culture differences between working in South Korea, working in India, that have been interesting for you?
Very interesting question. And there are a lot of similarities, in the culture. If we go back historically, and there are a lot of commonalities, there are a lot of grounds on which very positive friendships have happened between the two countries. So whether it was India helping in the Korean War, or historically there is, in the mythology also there's an epic where one of the Indian princes got married to a Korean prince. So yeah, so that's in the history. But even today, like, education, for example, both the countries are very sensitive about education. So they want their, typically the parents would want their children to be highly educated, to be doing well, to be joining the best of the companies. Of course, in Korea, it's even far more, but typically in India, people are very sensitive about education. So there are a lot of deep-rooted cultural similarities which exist between the two countries. Of course, work-wise, yes, there are a lot of differences. And I strongly feel that, the two countries can really complement each other. And I think in some ways they are also currently. There are things like, let's say culturally in terms of work, being very efficient in terms of the tasks which are to be done, doing them very timely and with a method. These are some of the very core Korean cultural, characteristics at work. That way, they're very close to the way Germans also work. And when it comes to, let's say, for example, innovation and creativity, it's very high in Indians. So a typical thing like, what we normally call as jugaad really works. So if there is a problem, Indians will know how to find out a solution to that. That's something which comes naturally, being very enterprising. Korea is light years ahead in terms of technology. The kind of internet speed you get here, you can never get that in any country. I mean, 18 minutes and you can download a full movie. I'm talking about very basic, for a layman to understand. So if one has such strong speeds, whatever layers you build on that will definitely be, light years ahead. So that's something which is there to see, when I look at startups here. So, one of the startups which won the best award at the WSA for the category in inclusion and empowerment is a startup which is like almost, I think, 10 years old in the country, and they have developed a smart watch which has, and that's for the blind, so it has the braille in it. So so there are a lot of technological advancements, and therefore a lot of innovation and creativity based on technology also which has come in. So I feel the two countries in terms of Koreans technology and efficiency, clubbed with the flexibility, creativity, innovativeness, the entrepreneurial spirit of the Indian. If the two come together, it's a deadly combination.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, because I would also ask, I suppose, you've touched on some of these things already, but if there was like one major thing, I mean, clearly infrastructure is very important in South Korea, but I'm asking you because, you've been there a while now, but you're still a relative outsider, having a sort of more of an outsider's view. What would you say, like, for the rest of the world? What's the one thing that we could really all learn from the way they do things in South Korea?
I would say understanding the sense of urgency and turning around the solutions is something which the world needs to learn from Korea. Wow. If they find a solution, if they see a problem in front of them, so normally, in a normal scenario, they like to go by the book. So what I mean by that is, let's say you go to a Starbucks cafe or any coffee shop, in Korea, and if you ask for a meal combo, let's say a sandwich with a coffee, and you want the coffee to be replaced by tea, it won't be done. So So, so on daily basis, while, they like to go by the method, they like to stick to the book. But, when we talk about larger issues, when we talk about, let's say, for example, even COVID, the way they turned around the whole thing. So the sense of urgency, which they drive, it's cultural, that sense of urgency is very high in everything they do.
And this is
So
something, yeah, we could all probably stand to learn from and kind of.
yeah, so I think in a lot of situations it works in favor of them, and that is what I think the world can learn from them, because everything then grows from there. If you have a sense of urgency, then you would figure out what solution to create. You would figure out what technologies to use. One gets creative in every way, and yeah, so that's something which comes very quickly to them. And the good thing is that it's easy for them to bring people together and to turn around those situations.
Interesting.
So everyone falls in line very fast.
So I guess last question really, I would say, is of all these kind of experiences and things that you've done, what's this thing in your career that you're perhaps the most proud of having done or having accomplished?
I think my assignment with the Reliance Broadcast Network Limited, which was in Bombay, as the business head for Bombay, was one of the assignments which I'm really proud of. I still remember when I took up that role, the revenues were all-time low. The attrition was all-time high. And the team was absolutely demotivated. So it was a transformation which was required. And immediately I had to work out a strategy where we had to literally bring the people together. So not only there was a trust deficit, there was no common goal, So had to bring the team together, understand each team member's strengths. And, when I say bringing them together, it's to make them understand the common goal that we are working for. And it's to make them work towards a common goal. So when I said, worked on each person's strength, I also gave them space, to put their own innovation and creativity. And believe me, within 6 months, it was a different environment. The floor was different. There was a different vibe on the floor. So much positivity came in, and it reflected in the revenues. So the revenues grew by almost 100%. We got our biggest advertisers back with us. So in Bombay, the biggest advertisers are with the FMCG or BFSI industry. And one of the biggest advertisers in FMCG in India, in Bombay, is Unilever.
Yes.
So we got back our clients. We grew those clients, and after a few months, we also worked on the content. So the station, when I joined, so this is the revenue side I talked about. On the content side, our rating was the lowest. So there's an IMRB rating which comes, in media. So ours was the lowest. Out of 5-6 stations, we were the 6th, and we had to really work on our product. So we literally made a turnaround from pure contemporary Bollywood. We moved to retro Bollywood. It was a 360-degree turnaround. It was a huge gamble which we were doing. And within 6 to 8 months of that launch or that move to retro, we were number 1.
But how did you, in the city. How did you have the confidence to do that? So you say it was a big risk. So you were completely changing from the contemporary Bollywood content to the retro. And it's big risk. What did you base that on?
So there was a lot of method and data that went into it. It was not just pure gut. Uh, there was a research which was done. Complete segmentation of the market was done in terms of demographics. So basis that, and then of course, our experience, we went ahead and launched. We had, so again, dialing back to, startups, we tried to create a competitive advantage. We tried to create our own space because every other station was offering contemporary. And all said and done, retro strikes, retro strikes with all of us. And it happened. So yes, there was a certain element of gamble. I'm not, saying there was no gamble at all, but it was a calculated move. And I think the whole idea of creating that unique positioning and competitive advantage worked for us. We started, when we started getting number 1, number 2 rating, we were able to renegotiate our rates with the clients. So a great product impacted our revenues in a positive way. So this is
there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot here, I think, for people to take from. Like, I love the idea. I would guess when you were in discussions about this content change of emphasis, and even though you had all this data, the fact that there's 5 or 6 stations and every station was doing the same content is in itself a sort of psychological or an emotional barrier for people to try something different, right? Because there's people inherently feel this risk of like, but everybody else is doing this, we should do this as well. So it's fascinating to hear you say, yes, you did the research, but the positioning becoming unique with a very kind of simple, I suppose, idea. That I think is something a lot of people could probably learn from in different businesses, different industries.
And we didn't have anything to lose, we were at number 6. So, so it is something which we said, okay, we have nothing to lose. I mean, so.
Well, there's something else that was interesting, I think, in what you've said about it, is that you started with the team. You kind of pulled everyone together. So team and vision, right? And getting everybody bought into the vision. And then sort of moved on to content after that, if I'm understanding correctly. So it really, you started with the people and with trying to get everybody like together and working together and motivated.
And then revenues first.
Okay.
Revenues first. And once we brought back the revenues to a good level, we looked at the content also.
Okay, so if I get it right, team, revenue, content.
Yeah, because revenue was in bits, I mean, and those are the no-brainers, the low-hanging fruits, which have to be brought in. Of course, there's a lot of work that goes beyond, behind it, because there was virtually no team. And like I said, there was no, there was no oneness. There was no feeling of oneness. So somehow, the team was left demotivated by the earlier leaders. And so, in that situation, what is important is to really bring back those revenues. And we grew by 100%. And then parallelly, we worked on the product, because there's always, so while you're doing well, how can you raise the bar? Raising bar is where we said, yes, there's a lot of scope in the product, because we were not able to renegotiate the rates with the clients. And the client pays for the station which has, good content. So we tried to raise the bar, and that's where, we went back to the content, went back to the product, reworked, and, I've already told you the rest of the
No,
story.
Fascinating. That's some really good lessons, I think, in there. But yeah, I think we're running out of time now. So let's leave it there. And thank you very much for your time, Neeti. And
my pleasure.
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It was lovely chatting with you.
Oh, no, my pleasure. My pleasure. Me too.
If you made it to the end of this video, why not leave a comment or a question below? I'd love to know what you think about some of the topics we've discussed here today. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and do subscribe to the channel so that you can stay up to date with all my videos as they go live. Thank you so much for watching and stay curious.